Hey, and welcome to episode 58 of Think Like a Hacker. We are in Denver at our new facility at LSI, and that's why we have all these fancy lights around us and so on. This is the podcast where we chat about WordPress security and innovation, and we have all kinds of things going on this episode. I think our lead story is the controversy around Yoast's ads, which I'm not sure there should have been such a big brouhaha, but we'll definitely dive into that. And we've got a few other interesting stories, so get ready for a great episode. Hey, Kathy, how's it going in Phoenix?
It's going great. It's actually cloudy and the weather isn't trying to kill me, so all is good.
Winter in Phoenix when the weather doesn't try to kill you.
Yes, it's a positive.
Cool. Should we just dive straight in and tackle the subject of the Yoast fiasco?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'll tell you what, why don't you lead with your sense of the whole thing, and I'll tell you what. Why don't we tell the story first, because I'm not sure that everyone has actually heard what's going on. So, what happened was Yoast over Thanksgiving introduced an ad into the WordPress admin interface, and it was put out as a release. It was included in one of their releases, right, Kathy?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was included with one of their releases, and actually they had some code in the plugin to activate this ad right around American Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and so they've taken a lot of heat for that, I think, and we'll kind of dive into why and so on. But I just want to preface this by saying that I'm a little bit biased in covering the story because I know Marieke from Yoast, I know Michael. In fact, we interviewed them on the podcast recently. They're at WordCamp US. We've met the folks from Yoast at WordCamp EU. We've got other friends like Taco, who is in Yoast customer service, if I'm not mistaken, and I know Tim's good friends with him, and these are friends of ours basically, and so
yes.
And we know that they're very good people, and so on the one hand, you might say that our point of view is skewed because of the friendship, but I think on the other hand, that adds some useful context because we're not anonymous internet persons looking from afar and making judgments. We're kind of in it, and we know these folks. So Kathy, do you want to take a stab at why there was such a brouhaha around the ad that appeared in the admin interface?
Sure. So, the ad appears, and there was sort of an X, close this ad up in the corner, right-hand corner of the ad as it appeared in the WordPress administrative dashboard. It appeared for all users, no matter your level. So somebody who was just an author or a contributor would have seen it, as well as the administrator of the site who's in charge of updating plugins and whatnot. Part of the problem was that when you clicked the X, instead of closing the ad, it actually went to the landing page for the ad, and I think that was one error that set the internet aflame. And outrage just started piling on. But we've seen the conversation about advertising in the administrative dashboard happen before.
Yeah.
I've seen ads from smaller plugins, but Yoast is installed on, 5 million WordPress sites?
I thought it was 9 million sites, but yeah.
9, okay.
The number that I saw from Marieke was 5 million, so it's in that range, and it is by far one of the most popular plugins for WordPress. Exactly,
and so I think that the fact that users that didn't understand that there was an SEO plugin installed on the site saw it. The fact that so many people saw it and it was unusual for them, if somebody's not using some of the smaller plugins that have done things like this in the past, like Yith has had an ad that a lot of people have complained about, but it's much smaller install base. So this kind of took the WordPress world by storm because there has been so much discussion over whether or not WP admin is a place for ads for plugins, whether it is Jetpack. There was a discussion that we had earlier this year on our episode on in early April, I believe, about whether or not plugins should be allowed to talk about their premium services in WP Admin. And there was also another article that somebody wrote after this, sort of bringing up all sorts of plugins that are sort of run off of this freemium model where the base plugin is available within the repository, like Wordfence is, but there is a premium component that can get unlocked for a fee and the advertising. And people have poked at us in this conversation as well. So it's definitely, top of mind right now. Now, Marieke came out and apologized and said that this was a mistake, and she took ownership of it, which I think was pretty.
We're going to dive into that because I was so impressed with how she the leadership that she showed, and there's some very specific examples that I want to take a look at. But if we just go back to that X that you mentioned, I think the issue around that is that any admin notice needs to be dismissible. And so I think that word dismissible is, and I think their intention was to actually make it dismissible, and it was just a bug that when you clicked it, it didn't dismiss. In fact, it took you to the place that the ad wanted you to go, which made it look very malicious. It's like, we tricked you. You thought you were going to dismiss this ad, but in fact, we're going to try to sell you something on our website, and it was just a mistake. But and so, and to your point about Yoast's install base, I think I think one of the things that they said is that a lot of plugins have done this, have put ads in the admin interface, but Yoast's install base is huge, and so a lot of folks that have Yoast installed and maybe don't have any other plugins installed or very many other plugins installed have not seen this before, and so it was a bit of a shock because the rollout for this ad was massive, and I think it also appeared throughout the entire admin interface, right? It wasn't just on Yoast's pages.
Right. Yeah, I saw it on one of my sites because I spent my Thanksgiving messing around with WordPress,
which you told me about, by the way. By the way, Kathy is like a huge nerd because she actually spent her entire week off geeking out with WordPress, which is impressive to say the least.
I did.
But and so I think that a lot of plugins have ads of some form or things that they hope that users will click to, upsell them or whatever, but it's usually on their own pages within the admin interface, and this appeared throughout the entire admin interface. Now, I want to just segue into, Marieke's response here. And she initially responded, I'm going to just try to load up the tweet over here, but she initially said, that Black Friday banner was not the best idea. We're truly sorry for the annoyance and difficulties it may have caused. We did not think this through properly. If you want, you can update to a new version of our plugin without that banner. And she got a lot of positive responses from the community and folks that are very prominent in the community. Maddie Osman, who we interviewed a couple of weeks back, Bridget, Willard, Francesca Morano, who of course appeared in the Open documentary, and so on. And Marieke was there. She was interactive. She's, of course, the CEO of Yoast and is a wonderful person, by the way. Check out our interview with her. But Marieke is a PhD. She's actually, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Marieke van der Rakt. And, of course, she's married to Yoast. And she's taken on the CEO role. But she's very smart. And what really impressed the heck out of me, if I can find my notes here again, which seem to have disappeared, but what really impressed the heck out of me is that a guy who I don't know, Tyron, he commented, and he was expressing his frustration, saying this was terrible to see in a client's site. At first, I thought the site was hacked and so on. And but in his comment, he said, I think he was basically saying, whoever okayed this needs to be supervised. And what that did is it really opened the door for Marieke to throw one of her team members under the bus. And instead, what she did is she said, I okayed this, I'm the CEO, and I made a big mistake, I am sorry. And I got to tell you, man, I get chills just reading that because I don't know how many times we've all seen major companies, a certain major coffee company, for example, where the CEO does not take ownership. And instead what they do is they say all the people responsible have been disciplined and are getting retraining and, or have been fired in some cases. And that isn't happening here at all. There's a period at the end of every single one of these sentences. I okayed this, period. I am the CEO, period. And I made a big mistake, period. I am sorry, period. Like it's unambiguous. And I absolutely love that. And I think that what you should do, if you are a Yoast user or you're a member of the WordPress community, read into that the ethics behind this company and the ownership that Marieke as a leader is taking. I think that really sends a strong message that she understands this is a mistake. They tried something, it didn't work. They got feedback from the community. Some of it was fairly rough, and she is completely taking ownership of that. And the person that is going to continue to be, I'm assuming, at the helm of this company is that person. That's the person in charge of the product that you're using. Now, do you want to use that product, or do you want to use someone else's product? And Kathy, I think that you saw this, who is actually trying to capitalize on this situation, where we've got another SEO plugin they've been retweeting images of the ad banner, of Yoast's ad banner, and saying, "Oh, come on over to us. We'll take much better care of you. Look at how unethical those folks are." To me, that feels a little bit sleazy. That feels a little bit unethical. And if you want customers, go get them yourself. Don't try and capitalize on someone else's moments of making a mistake and being beaten up over it. What are your thoughts on that, Kathy? Those sort of retweets that we saw from a competitor or two.
I didn't like that. You and I have talked a lot over the past year or so about leadership, and leadership basically is the flagship of the organization. And there was somebody you basically challenged me to think about leadership, and I read about Southwest Airlines. And Southwest Airlines, the CEO got a complaint from a customer, and that customer said, "I have been here for flying with Southwest for 20 years, and this employee, this flight attendant treated me poorly, and I didn't like that they did this, and they made me wait for that," and had a litany of complaints. And the CEO basically said to that customer, "We're sorry to see you go," and put the employee and put the people of the organization ahead of the customer. And this kind of harkens, what Marieke is doing here, I think harkens to that same kind of philosophy of taking ownership and standing behind the people who actually executed on this. Maybe there was somebody else in the organization who said, "Hey, let's do a Black Friday thing and let's do it this way." And she okayed it, and she took ownership of this. And this just shows what true leadership really is. And that's where loyalty is going to come. People see through that. They see through the sleazy tweets trying to steal, market share away from Yoast. They see through everything, and they see the flagship of Marieke's tweet basically taking ownership and standing not necessarily behind her team, but in front of her team and taking the brunt of this attack.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just so impressed, and I honestly think that. I'm really just repeating what you're saying, but I think the community recognizes this, and I certainly will shake her hand the next time I have the pleasure of meeting her and the rest of the Yoast team. Where to from here in terms of this situation? And I think that from my perspective, I think products evolve and companies evolve, and they evolve in concert with their customers. And I think that's really what this is. And so I think that they're going to use the data that they got here and the feedback they got from the community to just plot a path forward. I think Yoast remains incredibly popular. I think they bring a lot to the community, and I'm also interested to see what the folks out there, what feedback they have on my perspective here. Like I said, I know the people behind the company, so it makes me biased, but it also perhaps brings some additional perspective. And if you think I'm being too kind, by all means, come after me. but I don't think that's necessarily the case. And I'm certainly excited about the path forward for them.
Yeah. What do you think about selling premium within the admin dashboard? Do you have, obviously, we do it within our dashboard, and we've come under fire in the past for even being premium. What are your thoughts on just sort of that entire idea of using the admin module or the admin tool as an advertising area?
I think it's a great question. I think it's a great discussion. Let's definitely have that. So I think there's an economic reality that needs to be recognized here. Yoast's team is 90 in the Netherlands, and then they've got another 20 people around the world. Our team is, what are we, about mid-20s in terms of full-time employees, and then we've got another 10 or 15 contractors, and we're mostly US-based. The payroll for teams that are that size is in the millions. And if you have looked at, if you're CFO of a company like this, or you're an executive and you're looking at your cash flow, seeing the amount of outflow is sobering, and you need to make at least that much to stay in business. That's the reality. If you want to keep making Yoast, that's what you need to do. If you want to keep making Wordfence, that's what needs to happen. And if that doesn't happen, I'm assuming that both of our companies don't have a huge pile of 50 million lying in the bank. You will go out of business. You will cease to exist very quickly, and everyone will have to go and get a job somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That's the economic reality. And that's kind of like looking at it in a very pessimistic way. Looking at it in a more optimistic way, I think that both of our products and Yoast's product are good, very good. They do a good job of what they should be doing, which is in Yoast's case helping with SEO, and in our case securing the WordPress website. For those to be good, we as companies need to hire excellent engineers, excellent QA analysts, in our case, security analysts to do research. We've got a threat intelligence team that runs a huge sort of data operation that sifts through different attack types and figures out what the emerging attacks are, what the new threats are, what we should be protecting against. We develop firewall rules and so on. And every single person in our team, in the Wordfence team, is an A player. We're extremely fortunate to have the team that is as good as they are. But one of the reasons why is because we pay our team market rate salaries. We have excellent healthcare, and in chatting with some friends, unfortunately lately I'm realizing the difference between great healthcare and kind of sucky healthcare in the US. It is a massive difference. And so on. I don't want to turn this into some kind of marketing spiel for our company, but to be able to have an excellent product, you need to be able to attract excellent people and have a team that is able to create that and continue to create it and so on. And that's why we have to charge for our product. And that's why Yoast has to charge for their product. You have to have some kind of business model. And part of that is letting people know that there is a premium option for the product or whatever the thing is that you're selling, and why it offers value that is worth more than the dollar that you'll exchange for that product. And that's what marketing is. That's really what marketing is. It's creating that awareness. It's saying, hey, we've got this thing, and you already use the free thing. We've got this other thing that we think is worth more than the money that it'll cost you, and it has all this value that it'll bring to you. We have to let you know about that somehow. And in our case, in the Wordfence case, we do that as organically as possible. We don't shove ads in. We don't kind of sneak ads in front of you like, surprise, you wanted to read this content, but actually here's an ad. Now click on it, even though you're in a really bad mood because you were trying to do something else at that moment. We don't try to engage in that kind of marketing. It's more this, where we're having a conversation with our customers, and we're, hopefully teaching folks things, letting them know about what the latest news events are and so on. And along the way, you kind of learn that there's the people behind Wordfence are maybe the trustworthy, or maybe I don't look trustworthy, I don't know, but maybe I should get the heck off camera. But that's the kind of marketing that we engage in, but we have to do it. We have to, and I think that the trick is to make it as ethical and as organic as possible. Another way that we engage in marketing is we publish research that is extremely valuable to our customers, and in some cases competitors who benefit from our research as well. But what that does is it lets people know that we are at the top of our security game. We're leaders in the industry, and if they're looking for someone to trust in WordPress security, they should come to us. And so I think marketing is very necessary. And I think that marketing inside the product can work very well as long as it is, again, it's organic. It appears in places where it makes sense. Like there's a feature that we think that customers would benefit from, but it costs us money. And so we want to let them know about it, but we can't give it to them for free because, for example, when we were doing SMS alerts, every SMS costs us money, so we have to charge for that. And so, but we want to let you know about it. And so in the product, where that feature would be, we say, hey, there's this thing. You have to pay for it, but here's what it does, and here's what the value is. And so I think that kind of marketing in the product makes sense. I think that there is a general. To be perfectly honest, I think capitalism is, it can be predatory. It lends itself to a predatory environment, or creating predators, to try to trick people into exchanging their money for something. And I think that there's a lot of garbage out there, and there's a lot of very aggressive marketing out there. And so I think what's happened is that we've all developed a little bit of an aversion to marketing because of that, because there's so much nastiness out there. And I think that's a lot of what you're seeing here, is that this is being recognized as, it's being perceived as aggressive marketing, overly aggressive marketing, even though it was a mistake. And it's being associated with that kind of predatory phenomena that exists in a free market economy. And I think that's part of what happens. If you make a mistake and put a marketing message in the wrong place, you get backlash because of the history there. And everyone's got history with aggressive marketing tactics, right, Kathy?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And I think, a lot of people get, well, WordPress is free and it's this free 5-minute install. And so that they think that everything that happens with WordPress should be free. And, if you want to stay competitive as a site owner, the SEO world is changing year after year. The security world is changing year after year. Site design is changing all the time too. So you basically enter into a relationship of trust with your plugin vendors, that they're going to cover those deeper topics. If every site owner had to learn all that there is to SEO or all that there is to security, there'd be no way. You wouldn't be able to run your business. But they trust people like Yoast and people like us to stay on top of our areas of expertise so that they can leverage that. And in order to keep the lights on and to, feed the family, so to speak, that relationship works. And I think the freemium model does work because not only are you helping, nonprofits that, might not be able to, pay for a premium plugin, but they're getting, they're getting some basic needs covered and keeping their site safe or making sure that people can find them. But, people who can afford it, support that relationship, support the people who are continuously improving their product so that site owners don't have to be experts at SEO or security. Yeah,
for sure. I think the one good thing here is that the WordPress community is, it's huge, but it's also, it's almost like a small village. A lot of people know each other, and I think we all recognize what's going on here, and a lot of voices in the community are weighing in. I mentioned Francesco, Maddie, and so on, and they're seeing the reality of the situation, and that has kind of spread that understanding of what's really going on has spread into the rest of the community, and so that it really seems to have dampened the flames. And I think it's all turned out for the best, and I'm certainly I continue to be excited about Marieke leading Yoast. I think it's great, and I think she's got a great team behind her. And so. All right, so enough about Yoast. I think that whole situation is going to blow over, and they're going to continue to innovate and deliver an awesome product. And let's move on to other news. So Kathy, I guess there was an Avast and AVG, or a couple of extensions that were removed by Mozilla from their browser. And I don't know if Chrome did the same, but they were sending quite a bit of data back to the home base, right?
Yeah, this was originally reported by a security researcher, Vladimir Palant. Vladimir Palant was a security researcher who originally reported this in October. And he brought this to Mozilla, and after some pressure, Mozilla decided to remove Avast and AVG extensions from the add-on portal because what he had found was that these plugins into the browsers for Mozilla and Chrome were actually sending a lot more data back home than they needed to. So these 4 extensions, 2 were from Avast and 2 were from AVG, are still available on the Chrome Web Store, but Mozilla did remove them. When these security extensions are active, they will request information about visited websites from a Avast server, and transmitting that data allows reconstruction of your entire web browsing history and much of your browsing behavior. Now, a lot of people may have these browser extensions installed because they are concerned about security. The Avast and AVG extensions are looking for viruses in websites that you may be visiting. So the fact that these are actually sending so much data back home for a security conscious user is rather concerning. Vladimir Palant stated that the amount of data being sent went way far beyond what is necessary for the extension to function, and he compared it to competing solutions such as Google Safe Browsing. So if you are using these extensions, dive in deeper and look at this research. We'll have links to his primary research in the show notes. It does look like these are still available on Chrome, but they have been removed from the Mozilla store.
It's kind of interesting. I just wanted to jump in here. So I guess, first of all, Avast is a security company, and so this is not a good look.
Right, it isn't.
Right. And the reason this matters is because if you have an ad blocker installed and you're in incognito mode or whatever because you're researching some medical issue or something, that data will still get sent back to these companies through these extensions. And so you're not actually in a private mode or anything like that. And so that's why this matters. But just kind of going back to Google Safe Browsing, for example, to be honest, in my opinion, this is a little bit of a gray area because and I haven't looked at this technically, I haven't reverse engineered the code, but based on my reading of this, the story, what sounds like they were doing is they were just sending URLs that were being visited by these users back to home base so that Avast and AVG can actually see the plain text URLs that the user is visiting. Now, the way Google Safe Browsing works, or worked at least when I wrote the code for our integration with GSB, is they use hashes and hash prefixes to recognize host names and so on. And there's still a bit of data that can be inferred from that, from a hash prefix that's being sent to their servers. And so it's not cut and dried that Google gets absolutely no data from the GSB and people's usage of it. But I think sending back plain text URLs is certainly not a good look, right? Yeah,
definitely not. And Avast they stated that they are going to work with Mozilla to resolve this issue, and that they're going to implement some of the Mozilla's what they're calling new requirements. So it looks like they are going to start to address some of these privacy concerns.
Yeah, well, interesting, and good catch from the researcher there. So yeah, in other news, Adobe admits a breach of Magento Marketplace portal. Ouch. What's the story there?
Yeah, that is a big ouch. So Magento is an e-commerce platform. Some of our customers may, have to manage Magento installs as well as WordPress installs. So I thought this was an interesting thing to look at. So the marketplace is much like the WordPress repository, where you have themes and plugins for a Magento installation, which is e-commerce based. And they found that an intruder had actually gotten into basically the repo, so the marketplace for Magento themes and plugins. And some of the discussion that was happening on Twitter, going over the notification that Adobe had sent to their users, suggested that the extent of the breach was names, usernames, email addresses, and phone numbers. But ZDNet is reporting that some possibly limited commercial information, such as percentages of payments Adobe had made to theme and plugin developers. We still don't have any details on the vulnerability that was exploited or how it was exploited. But this is definitely something to take a look at. If you have an account on the marketplace, you've probably already received notification and have changed your username, password combos or whatever in order to keep your information safe there. But definitely an interesting breach for our web developing customers.
Yeah, for sure. And doesn't this remind you of Matt's research into that vulnerability in the WordPress repository?
Yeah, I was hoping you'd bring that. It does. Because we don't know exactly what happened here. And that is still something that's kind of hanging out as something that we'd like to see addressed with the WordPress repository in terms of code signing, right?
Right, yeah. What did we dub it? The Barry Doomsday scenario?
Exactly, yeah. It's still,
so this
it's
is,
still there, hashtag.
Right. Right. So this is Matt Barry, our lead developer's research into finding a security vulnerability in the WordPress.org infrastructure that could have led to remote code execution. And I guess the doomsday scenario that we're talking about, and this applies to any repository or app store even, is that an attacker gets in and they modify very popular plugins with malicious code and then distribute that to a massive number of WordPress sites, or even WordPress core, sneak something malicious in there and then distribute it. And, we're not being, I think, overly dramatic or scaremongering when we're chatting about this. There's been a lot of conversations about code signing, which is one of the ways that the plugin repository could mitigate that particular Barry Doomsday scenario. There was some progress made, and then the progress was kind of unmade as they rolled back some code, and it's an ongoing conversation. But I think that this is just a reminder to WordPress that, a vulnerability in the infrastructure can lead to some serious badness going on. Little shot across the bow, eh, Kathy?
Yeah, and to be clear, we don't have any indication whatsoever that anything like that happened to Magento, but we also don't have any indication that it didn't. So, but it's definitely a concern if you're downloading any kind of code from any kind of repository to ensure that that repo is safe.
For sure. And yeah, when we do these podcasts, I'm actually looking at a shared document that Kathy and I work on, and she's just added to the document, add a link to Matt's research in the show notes. So we'll be doing that, so you can kind of reference Matt's thinking on securing the infrastructure there. And all right, now I think that you need to cover the next story, because honestly, it really frustrates me hearing about this, the .org fire sale. And we were chatting about predatory capitalism earlier in the show, and this just feels like a little bit of that. But I guess private equity has gained control of the .org registry. Yeah, and it kind of is dripping a little bit with some icky nepotism too, isn't it? Oh, man. Actually, you know what it drips with is Old Boy Network.
Yeah.
There's an old boy network there that decided that there was an opportunity to make some money, and they've gone ahead and done it, and it is just disgusting. I mean, I've stayed abreast of the story, but I quickly unplug because when I read about this, it just bloody infuriates me. But anyway, do you wanna describe what's going on to our listeners?
Sure. Okay, so this summer we reported that ICANN removed a long-standing price cap in its contract with the Public Interest Registry, or PIR, the nonprofit registry which manages .org extension, and that's who was setting yearly pricing. So that happened this summer, and then we hear about the sale price of .org extension to a private equity firm, Ethos Capital, was disclosed at $1.135 billion. So now PIR has the authority to basically set .org for nonprofits and other organizations that aren't in the for-profit space. PIR has that authority to basically set that price. In doing some additional research, we find that there are connections between the current and former CEO at Ethos Capital, ICANN, and the .org registry in the lead up to this sale, with major players in this acquisition trading various managerial roles at each organization over the years. So it all seems kind of, contrived, like they knew what they were doing. ICANN is saying that they are powerless to stop .org private equity sale. And PIR currently is pricing each domain at about $10 per year, bringing in about $100 million a year. So no small change there. And Ethos Capital has said it would potentially raise domain prices 10% each year, which sounds small, but if you start thinking about that over 10 years, that would basically double its investment in a decade. So it sounds like, in a nutshell, .org has just been handed over to private equity and they're going to try to make money off of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the privatization of .org, and it's absolutely disgusting. I'm contrary to some of my earlier comments in the podcast, I'm actually a free market guy. I kind of like less regulation and so on, unlike my colleague standing behind the camera over there who's, no, I'm just kidding. Sean and I always have fun political debates, but I actually, I'm generally a free market. I'm a businessman, I own a business and so on. But I have been on the internet for a very long time. I've been on the internet since the early 90s, professionally since the early 90s, actually developing one of the first aptitude tests on Netscape's commerce server, if anyone remembers that. And I know the spirit behind .org and what .org is and what it's been used for and so on. And I remember a time when it was like, ooh, can we even get a .org domain? Because it implies nonprofit and community and that kind of thing. And then it seemed like you could just get a .org domain for, anyone could get one. And of course, major websites have been built on .org, like /.org, for example, and many, many others. And this move is absolutely disgusting. It is for me, it's tantamount to the privatization of air traffic control, or the IRS or something like that. Essentially some kind of government utility. And there's a great blog post on the Harvard blog that speculates about how to monetize .org, and I think it gives you a pretty good idea of what the future holds here. So I'll just kind of jump through some of the bullets here. Some of the ideas that they came up with, and these are not absurd by any stretch of the imagination. One of them is to maintain a 10% annual increase for domains with the least demand. Another is to create multiple price tiers for popular domains up to 100 times the base rate. I mean, that's the future of .org, which is like a cornerstone of the web and of the internet. And this, it's now moved into a mode where you can do the same thing that you're seeing on these domains like .film and that sort of thing, where you have different pricing depending on the popularity of a domain. Open a registry-owned registrar and start undercutting the competition. So basically, there's a lot of registrars out there that are selling .org. If you control .org, then you can have your own registrar and just undercut everyone else and take all the sales. Package and sell data about domain holders and purchases to third parties. And we know how much people love that, in terms of gathering data. We just chatted about these extensions in Mozilla that were probably doing something similar. Explore merge with donuts.org is more valuable in combination, saving on overhead and data analysis, raising price floor for other TLDs when .org prices rise. Explore this is hilarious. Explore a sale back to VeriSign. And then explore acquisition by other investment groups. Some nations have venture arms that might have extra reasons to run .org for even the chance of influencing what can be hosted on those domains, because it is, after all, now a private entity, right? It's the privatization of .org, so why not sell it to someone outside of the US or a government that has deep pockets but is kind of adversarial and loves surveillance? No names mentioned. Kathy, I don't know what to make of this, and it's done. I mean, it's a done deal. There's no backing out here. So I don't know. It just makes me very sad.
Yeah, it is very sad, and I don't think anything. There has to be a balance, of course, between free market and protecting, an ideal. That's why we have utilities being, regulated, and not that I want to have the internet overly regulated, because I really like the free flow of information. But if one organization, one company that's motive is primarily profit is controlling that free flow of information, doesn't that sort of go against what the internet's all about?
Yeah. And the trouble with this is that it really it boils down to the debate of basic economics. Keynesian versus Hayekian economics. Do you want do government utilities have a place, or should everything be privatized? And I guess where I land on this is that some things shouldn't be privatized. Some things should be run by the public, which is really what the government is. They represent us. And I'm so disappointed in this. It really, I think the reason at my core of why this saddens me and why it deeply concerns me is because I wonder what this bodes for the future. Obviously .org, sounds like this has happened. There's no undoing it. But what else should we watch out for? What else could get privatized and then potentially change hands into an adversary, someone who has a very adversarial relationship with the rest of the internet and is just trying to either monetize or surveil or whatever. I think it's worth having that conversation. So anyway, sad news there, I would say. Something that's made me very unhappy. But why don't we move on from that and chat about something that's way happier, and that is the personal and social information of 1.2 billion people that were discovered in a massive data leak.
Fun. Wow.
Did you still have a bottle of whiskey back there, Sean? Because I think I might need it. All right. So Kathy, what's the story here?
Okay, this article came out November 22nd, or on October 16th, actually. Bob Diachenko and Vinny Troya, who are researchers, we've reported about some of their discoveries in the past, and they discovered a wide open Elasticsearch server with an unprecedented 4 billion user accounts with more than 4 terabytes of data. So they started poking around to see what they could find out about all of this data, and they found that it was almost a complete matched data being returned by People Data Labs API. They were matching it up actually to their own personal information, saying, okay, well, they're reporting this phone number. I never really had this phone number except for like 3 days or something. And so the server that leaked the data is they could not find that it actually was owned by People Data Labs. And they wanted to find out where this information came from. Are they a current or former customer of People Data Labs? They also found that this data was associated with PDL and Oxy data. So they're not quite sure who owns the server. They can't attribute that source, but it just underscores again that our data is not being safeguarded. And it's just another week and another data
breach of the week, right?
Data breach of the week.
Well, apparently now we're measuring them in the billions, not in the millions or even hundreds of millions. So definitely things are getting worse.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really wish I had a positive story to end this podcast on, but I don't. Yeah, maybe we'll just chat about what's going on this side for a minute. So, like I said, we're in a new facility in Denver. We're at LSI, which is a film lighting organization, and we have an amazing space that they've lent us, and we have office space here now as well for our film division, which is super fun. And that's why you're seeing all these cool lights around me over here. This is actually Sean that's set this up, and we're doing some fun experiments. So yeah, something positive to leave you with. But that is it for this week's podcast. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, definitely give us a review. We'd very much appreciate that. If you're listening on YouTube, like and subscribe. We'd also appreciate that. That helps us get the word out. And we're doing an interview later this week, Kathy.
Yes, we are. So we'll have that probably,
Awesome.
I would imagine, Friday.
Great stuff. All right, so we'll have that interview out later this week. And have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye, everyone.